I'm sorry. Okay. I think I was on mute, so it was not audible. I hope you're able to hear me now. So we will start the satsang with our prarthana. By the Guru's grace and the will of Sri Krishna, we have all assembled for this Gita satsang. May we have their guidance to be able to learn and adopt the things which will help us to grow spiritually. Let us chant the shlokas. Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsa Chanuramardhanam Devaki Paramanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Krishnaya Vasudevaya Haraye Paramatmane Pranatah Kleshanashaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Namostu te Vyasa Vishala Buddhe Pullaravindayatapatra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha Ramanujataya Patram Jnana Vairagya Bhushanam Srimad Venkatanathaaryam Vande Vedanta Deshikam Yo Nityamachyuta Padambuja Yukma Rukma Vyamohatastaditarani Trinaya Mene Asmadguror Bhagavatosya Dayaikasindhoho Ramanujasya Charanau Sharanam Prapadye. So with prayers at the lotus feet of the Acharyas, let us start the topic for today. So in the last satsang, we finished with the third chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. And now we have to start with the fourth chapter. So in this chapter, now we saw in the third chapter that Lord tried to explain to Arjuna that because of the vasanas that have taken over from so many janmas, because it is the very nature of the Jivatma to be used to doing karma, so following the path of karma yoga is superior to that of jnana yoga. And yet this chapter 4 is known as jnana yoga. Now why is that? We will come to that. Let us first see the shlokas with which it starts. So Krishna was only speaking there, and in the fourth chapter he continues again. So in this, the first shloka, Shri Bhagavanuvacha Imam Vivasvate Yogam Proktavan Ahamavyayam Vivasvan Manave Praha Manur Ikshvakave Bravit. So the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna said that I taught this eternal science of yoga. Which yoga? This karma yoga. To the sun god Vivasvan, who passed it on to Manu, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. So as Krishna is talking about how Arjuna should be following karma yoga, he tells him in passing, he mentions that I have already taught this yoga to Vivasvan. Vivasvan taught it to Manu, and Manu taught it to Ikshvaku. So as we said, in this chapter, this chapter is known as the chapter of Jnana Yoga. Now, everybody will be surprised, isn't it? Because the entire third chapter, Krishna has been going on telling Arjuna about how he should be following Karma Yoga, how Karma Yoga is superior to Jnana Yoga for people like him, and telling so much about this. Then why now is he going to talk about Jnana Yoga when he has spent so much time and energy in trying to explain the greatness of Karma Yoga or the suitability of Karma Yoga for Arjuna? Now, what is the meaning of saying that in this fourth chapter it is about Jnana Yoga? Here, the Acharyas give us an idea. We will, of course, see as the chapter goes further, we will see the meaning, why it is like that. But to sum up, to give you a brief overview, in reality, in this chapter, Krishna is going to talk about jnana, yes, certainly, but that jnana which is important to make our karmas into karma yoga. How jnana is a part of karma yoga. How jnana can be used, how it can be harnessed to perform Karma Yoga in an apt manner. That is what is going to be explained in this chapter. So it is actually about Jnana part of Karma Yoga. So, for example, to understand this, if we are performing some action in worship of Lord, like let us say somebody is doing puja to the Lord, let us say somebody is cleaning the temple, let us say somebody is carrying flowers, they have purchased flowers or they have tied the flowers by themselves and they are offering it to the Lord. Now that action which is being done is Karma Yoga. Let us say I made somebody else to buy flowers and told that person, you please buy the flower from the market and go to the temple and give it to the Lord, give it for the puja of the Lord. That is one level of doing. That is definitely better than not doing anything at all, isn't it? Rather than not having offered the flowers to the Lord, it is better that, okay, I have asked somebody else, maybe my servant maid, maybe somebody, a friend of mine, I have asked somebody to do that seva. So, but when I have done this, I have paid for the flowers, let us say. I have done some tyaga, but it is a very minute level of tyaga. I have only given money, right? I have not given my time. I have not given my attention. I have not spent my energy in doing that. Besides, when that person takes it to the temple and offers it there, that person is going to definitely get bigger part of the punya of performing that action. Okay. Let us say, suppose I, instead of sending somebody else, I myself bought the flowers and I went and I offered it to the Lord. Then I will get more punya. I will get greater benefit of having performed that action, right? Let us say I purchased flowers, I tied them myself up into a garland and I took them. More involvement, more sacrifice of time and energy, isn't it? So the benefit is going to be more. Let us say when I was tying the flowers, I was watching some TV program and I was tying those flowers. And I took it and gave it to the Lord. Let us say there is another person who has also tied flowers by herself. But this person, while tying those flowers, has been maybe listening to some bhajan or listening to some pravachan and has tied the flowers. Let us say there is a third person, a third devotee, who has purchased the flowers, who is in the process of tying the flowers. And all the time while tying up those flowers, this person is having the bhava that these flowers are going to adorn the Lord. So how great is the glory of the Lord? How much karunamayi the Lord is? How much compassion he is having? He has given me this opportunity for doing this seva to him, right? So the same action of offering flowers to the Lord can be done in different ways by different people depending on their pravritti, depending on their nature, depending on how much sattva rajas tamas is there in them, depending on their attitude, depending on their bhava, like this. Now, out of all these people, don't we agree that the last example I mentioned, that if somebody is doing that action with the knowledge, with the awareness that they are doing it as worship to the Lord, with the awareness that they are doing it for the pleasure of the Lord, with the awareness that they don't want any worldly benefit out of it, with the awareness that they are doing this as their sadhana, then that is the jnana part of the karma yoga that they are doing. Tying the flowers and offering them to the Lord is karma. What makes it karma yoga? The jnana, the awareness that I am doing this. I am blessed to be able to do this. I am grateful that I got the opportunity to do this. I am doing this because I want the Lord to be happy. I am doing this because these flowers are going to be sitting on the Lord's form and they will beautify him. And the Lord is going to feel happy by this. That awareness is what will make that karma into karma yoga. So this awareness, this jnana which you have, that is what is implied by saying that this chapter is going to be about jnana yoga. The awareness, the jnana which is required to perform our karmas in the appropriate way. That is what we are going to talk about in this chapter. So in the process of this conversation, Krishna explains to Arjuna many different things about himself. He says about himself, how he was born, how he was, what is the secret of his avatara? Why did he take avatara? Why does he take so many avataras? And so on, he is going to talk about it. Now, here already he has told Arjuna that I taught this. Now, they were talking about Karma Yoga, this, that. So, in the process, Krishna is telling Arjuna, I taught this to Vivaswan. Vivaswan passed it on to Manu. So, when he's saying, I taught, what is this? Who is this I? Who is this Lord? This Lord who is always present in this world. The person, the Lord who is eternal, who has always been there in the world at all times. Sada Sarvada, he has been here. Who is this Lord? This Lord who is now teaching this Karma Yoga to Arjuna. So, this Lord who is teaching Karma Yoga to Arjuna is the same Lord who has ever been present in this world. To Arjuna, it seems like Krishna is with him and his friend and his, cousin. He is thinking of it in those terms. But the Lord is the same Lord who has always been there, who will always be there, who is the Adhara for this entire universe, right? So he says, I have taught this first, this knowledge, this knowledge of Karma Yoga. I taught it first to Vivaswan. Who is Vivaswan? Vivaswan is another name for Surya. Now, Surya taught it to his son, who was called as Vaivasvata Manu. Why he was called Vaivasvata Manu? Because he is the son of Vivaswan. So, this happened about 28 Chaturyugas before this time when Krishna was telling to Arjuna. You must have heard of time being discussed in terms of yugas. So, you know that we have the Satya Yuga or Krita Yuga, then we have the Treta Yuga, then we have the Dwapar Yuga, and we have Kali Yuga. So, like this, one cycle of all the 4 yugas. Now, all those yugas are infinitely large, right? They are many lakhs of years in terms of time. But we don't need to go into those details, but we need to understand that whenever one cycle of all the 4 yugas gets completed, that is called as a Chatur Yuga. So that is one cycle of Chatur Yuga. So when Krishna was telling Arjuna, already by then 28 such Chatur Yugas had passed. So Krishna is saying, at that time, I had taught it to Vivaswan. Vivaswan taught it to his son Manu. Now, this Vaivasvata Manu is the one whom we all very famously know as Manu. How do we know? Because we have heard people talking mostly negatively about Manu Smriti, isn't it? So they say anything, any practice which is not even actually told by the Shastras, it is just a practice which has come in by people. Everybody says, oh, it was told in Manu Smriti. Go blame Manu for that, right? Then whenever they say that somewhere there is some problem with some caste issue, they will say it is because of what is taught in the Manu Smriti. Now they don't understand that this Manu was himself a Kshatriya. All these people who have so-called hatred towards the Brahmin community, they all will say that because Manusmriti is telling all regressive things, Manusmriti is telling all patriarchy stuff, Manusmriti is talking about putting women down. They are people who have actually not read Manusmriti. So if actually they had to read Manusmriti, they would see that concept, what is taught in that, what is written in that Manusmriti, these concepts which are there in the Sanatan Dharma are actually the most broad-minded concepts you will find in any of the religions anywhere in the world, right? So anyway, let us forget that. But why I mentioned this is because it is that same Manu. So it was taught by Surya to Manu. Now Manu taught it to his son who was Ikshvaku. Who is this Ikshvaku? The same Ikshvaku in whose name we know the Kula, the family of Ikshvaku, in which family Lord Rama took birth. So it was taught like that. And it was passing like that from one generation to the other. So the Shastras tell us that whatever is told in Manu Smriti, Manu was such a great person that whatever is told by Manu, take that as the complete prescription. Follow that blindly, and you will be always following the path of Dharma. This path of Karma Yoga, therefore, it has come from eternal times. It has been revealed by the Lord. It is not that somebody created Karma Yoga, the Lord created it. Just like we say Sanatan Dharma is always in existence. Just as we say the Lord has always been in existence. Similarly, whatever knowledge is there to attain moksha, that knowledge also has been eternally present. So this path of Karma Yoga is an eternal one. That's why it's called as Avyayam, right? So now we move on to the next shloka. So in continuation, the Lord tells Arjuna, Evam parampara praptam imam rajarshyo viduhu sakale neha mahata yogo nashtah parantapa. O Parantapa, he's calling Arjuna by that name. O person who subdues your enemies. O Arjuna, the saintly kings, the Rajarshis, thus received this science of yoga in a continuous tradition. But with the long passage of time, it was lost to the world. So here, Krishna is saying that just like he told that from Vivaswan it came to Manu, from Manu it came to Ikshvaku, like that, this went on. Now, after Ikshvaku, it kept passing on further and further. How did it pass on this knowledge? It was passed on by the Guru to the Shishya. So, through the Guru Parampara, from one to the other, it kept on moving. Now, in those times, it is not only the Brahmanas who were engaged in pursuit of Jnana. Even the Kshatriyas, even the Vaishyas had to have some kind of schooling in all the Shastras. So, then this knowledge kept on passing. So naturally, the kings who were ruling at that time, they also used to get instructions in this science of yoga. We all know, isn't it, that when we study the story of Rama, we say that Rama went to study in the Gurukula of Vasishta. Then we know that Rama was taken by Vishwamitra, and in the course of their journey, he taught them many things. He taught Rama and Lakshmana many things, and so on. So like this, even those who were in the Kshatriya class, who were the rulers, they also got knowledge. So from one king to another, now he's very specifically saying Rajarshis. Raja Rishis, those who were Raja by their occupation, but in nature they were saintly. They were Rishis by nature. Such kings, like we know also many examples, isn't it? We know about Janaka, who was the father of Sita Devi. We know about Ambarisha. We know about Raghu Maharaja. So many kings, great kings. They were very saintly in their nature. All these kings, they also got this knowledge from their gurus. So through the parampara it came. Now, although it kept on passing from one to the other, from one generation to the other, as it can happen with anything, as the time passes, that knowledge starts gradually becoming less. Now, although here in the shloka he is saying nashtaha, yogo nashtaha, kalena mahata yogo nashta. So what he means, because of the influence of time, this yoga became nashta. So nashta generally we say in terms of something being destroyed, right? But here it's not exactly destruction. Rather, it means that the prevalence of that knowledge started becoming less. The eligibility of the people to have that knowledge became lesser and lesser. Because as time passed, the Satvikta also kept on reducing. Now, when Krishna and Arjuna are having this conversation, it is Dwapar Yuga. So even then, the Satvikata is definitely higher than what it is in our present Kali Yuga. But then the fact remains that in Dwapar Yuga, the Satvikata had become definitely lesser than what it was in the first, in the Satya or Krita Yuga. So like that, in that sense, as time passed, slowly this knowledge became less because the kings or those rajas or even other people did not have the adhikara. They were not capable enough to understand that or to receive that knowledge. So because of that, the knowledge of the Karma Yuga reduced very greatly. And now Krishna is saying that that knowledge, which I had told at that time, and it had become less, now today I am telling it to you. So in the third shloka, Krishna tells Arjuna, Sa evayam maya tedya yoga proktah puratanaha bhaktosi me sakha cheti rahasyam hetaduttamam. The same ancient knowledge of yoga, which is a supreme rahasya, which is a supreme secret, I am today revealing unto you. Who is this you? Arjuna. Because you are my friend as well as my devotee who can understand this transcendental wisdom. So here Krishna is saying that this Karma Yoga, which was known in those times, I had only taught it to people and then it passed from one generation to the other through the Guru Parampara. This same Karma Yoga, today I am preaching to you, O Arjuna. Now, why Krishna is telling this to Arjuna? Here the Acharyas explain that Arjuna may be thinking that Arjuna has said he is not going to fight. I am claiming that why I want to kill my own people. I am feeling disheartened by all this. I want to give up all this fight and run away to the forest. So just to convince me that I should fight, Krishna has built up all these arguments out of the blue and he's simply trying to tell me that, isn't it? So Arjuna is probably may think like that, that just to convince me to fight in the war, Krishna is telling all that. So Krishna wants to make sure that Arjuna understands it is not something he's simply telling him without any authentic base. So Krishna is actually explaining what the Pramana is telling. Pramana is the source of knowledge. What the Shastras are telling, what is the basic, authentic source from where he's telling this. So that Arjuna is having confidence that yes, what Krishna is telling is indeed what has eternally been passed from then to now. Because we know that whatever was the actual authentic knowledge, that will always be true. Whether people interpret it like this or like that, that interpretation will keep on changing over time. But if you go to the basic source of the knowledge, everything is what is told in the Shastras is very much apt in that way in which it has been told. So Arjuna should not think that Krishna is concocting something to tell him just to convince him at this point of time. So Krishna is making sure that Arjuna understands that this knowledge is coming right from times immemorial, right? Now, when Krishna is telling this, that I am explaining it now to you. So maybe Arjuna is, like having a doubt that why is Krishna telling me all this? If it is such a secret knowledge, then if it was something, if this knowledge was such that only the Raja Rishis were able to understand it, then why I am being given this knowledge? So Arjuna is wondering that why is Krishna choosing to bestow this knowledge upon me? This is so much rahasya. This is so much special knowledge. It has been kept guarded among people who have great capacity. Why it is being told to me now? And in answer to that, Krishna explains the reason. He says, right? He's telling here, you are my bhakta, you are my sakha. Because of that, and due to this reason, I am explaining to you. So we know that Arjuna and Krishna were related by their birth also, because Arjuna's mother, who is Kunti, is the aunt of Krishna. Krishna's father, Vasudeva. Vasudeva's sister is Kunti. So Arjuna is his paternal aunt's son for Krishna. Now, is it only because of that relationship that Krishna is having so much affection for Arjuna? Indeed, if you look at it, right, Krishna has so much affection for Arjuna. He's spending so much time and energy on explaining telling the teachings to him through the Gita. Why is Krishna doing this? Because he has a lot of affection. He sees Arjuna not just as his cousin, but also as his friend and also as his devotee. Why devotee they are saying here? Because we have seen in the previous second chapter that Arjuna, who is so much in despair and in confusion and doesn't know what to do, he says, I am offering myself to you, Krishna. I am surrendering at your feet. You please teach me what has to be done. You tell me what is best for me. So with that bhava, he has approached Krishna. So not only Arjuna is a friend, not only he is his aunt's son, he is also a devotee of Krishna. Now, there are times when people think that, okay, Krishna had a lot of affection for Arjuna because he was his aunt's son. If it was only because of the relationship, then Krishna had two other sons, two other cousins who were his aunt's sons. One is Shishupala and the other one is Dantavaktra. We know the story of these Shishupala and Dantavaktra. They died at the hands of Krishna, isn't it? So it is not only the relation which you share with somebody which makes you close or distant. It is the bhava with which you interact with people that makes them close or different. So Shishupala was always cursing Krishna. Shishupala was always finding fault with Krishna. Whereas Arjuna thought that Krishna is his friend, philosopher, guide, right? And Krishna always has this bhava. He used to say very often, Mama prana hi Pandavaha. The Pandavas are my very life itself. They are very dear to me. It is told that at the time when the Lord went as Pandavaduta, he went to, seek the kingdom back, at least in part, for the Pandavas. He went as the messenger, as the Duta of the Pandavas to the Kaurava court. Then, when he went there, they had prepared a lot of things for him, and Duryodhana invited him. He said, "Please come to my house to have lunch." Krishna refused. Krishna's son was married to Duryodhana's daughter. So they were actually related to each other in that through that relationship of marriage. And yet Krishna refused to go to Duryodhana's house. So Duryodhana asked him that, why are you going to that low-born person? Who is this low-born person he's referring to? Krishna went to the house of Vidura. Vidura is Dharmaraja himself taken birth again. Vidura is nothing but an avatar of Yamaraja. Why he took that avatar, maybe we will see in some other satsangi when we get time. Vidura is such an exalted soul. He is the very personification of dharma. But Krishna is asked by Duryodhana that why are you going to that low-born person's house for lunch? Why can't you come and eat at my house? So Krishna explains to Duryodhana that the Shastras tell that if somebody is an enemy, we should not eat at their house, nor should we invite them to eat at our house. That is what the Shastras tell. If somebody is hostile to you, if you are enemies with somebody, neither you go and eat in their house, nor you should invite them to come and eat in your house. So that is why I am not coming to your house. So Duryodhana says, what enmity do you have with me? I have not done anything bad to you. I don't feel any enmity towards you. Why are you taking this attitude that I am an enemy? At that point, Krishna very specifically tells him that Mama prana hi Pandavaha. The Pandavas are my prana. I have so much affection for the Pandavas because they are on the side of Dharma always. And because you are inimical towards them, you are hostile towards them. Naturally, you are my enemy also. You don't need to do anything bad to me directly because you are being bad to the Pandavas, because you are hostile towards them. And I have put all my affection in them. So you are naturally my enemy. So much was the affection that Krishna had for the Pandavas, and out of all of them, especially for Arjuna. So these shlokas, we will stop here for today in this satsang. But just because this topic came up, I just thought I will mention that in Tamil Nadu, there is one Divya Desham in Kanchipuram area, which is called as Pandavadutar Perumal. The Lord is in a very large form there and he's sitting. This is a very unique Rupa. He is in the form of Lord Krishna, the image what you can see on the screen, where that dark form is there. The Murti in front is the Utsava Murti. So the Mula Murti is the one behind. So in that, he has a very large form. In fact, I think in that temple, when the priests have to adorn the Lord with the dhoti and all, I think they tie up more than 10 dhotis together so that they can completely cover the Lord's form. And it's a unique form where this Lord is sitting, he's sitting with his right leg folded, okay, as if on a chair it is folded, and the left leg is hanging deep down. And it's a very huge form. I think it's around 25 feet in size. So, what is the story told for how the Lord got this form and why he is worshipped in this form and why he is called as Pandavaduta Perumal in this temple? So, this is the form that the Lord took when he went as a Pandavaduta. We were talking about this Pandavaduta episode, right? So, what happened is Duryodhana had made up his mind that Krishna is coming as the Duta of the Pandavas. Mm, it is only if Krishna himself gets to go back and convey the message that Pandavas will be able to decide what has to be done. So imagine the folly, imagine the foolishness of this Duryodhana. He says, I will catch hold of Krishna and I will imprison him or I will kill him. What he is talking about? He has no reality, he has no understanding of the reality. There were so many people, other people around him who knew that already, that Krishna is the Lord himself. But this Duryodhana is blinded, he cannot see all that. So he made a plan. He prepared a very nice special seat for Krishna and he kept it ready. And when Krishna came to the court of Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana invited him and made him sit in that chair, in that specific chair. Now, what he insisted that he should sit on that chair. Krishna was a little, he was wondering, why is this fellow forcing me to sit on this particular chair? We know, isn't it, that when somebody forces us to do one particular thing, then we always get a doubt that there may be something there. And he knows the mentality of Duryodhana. So, when Krishna sat, what this evil Duryodhana's plan was, that chair was a very weak chair, and Krishna had a very huge body. So, the Acharya says that Krishna had been fed nice butter and curd and milk and everything by Yashoda so much that he always had a very large form. He was very always heavy. And that same thing is there in his older age also. So when he came there and he sat on that chair, this Duryodhana had arranged that the chair was very weak. There was a pit which had been dug under that chair, and that pit would open out into a what you say level below the ground. And in that place, he had kept these certain wrestlers ready, that Krishna will sit on the chair will break, the pit will open up, that ground will open up, Krishna will fall from the chair to the pit. Through the pit, he will fall into the ground below. And there, these wrestlers are going to fight him and kill him and finish him off, or at least imprison him. That was Duryodhana's evil plan. Now, Krishna sat in the chair. The chair did break. He did fall onto the pit and go down into the earth. Immediately, he assumed the Vishwarupa form. Before he showed Vishwarupa to Arjuna in the battlefield, Krishna had shown the Vishwarupa in the darbar, in the court of Dhritarashtra. And everybody, including Duryodhana, saw that. Even Dhritarashtra momentarily was given the eyesight to be able to see that form. But can we understand how our pravritti, how our nature makes us such that even after having that vision, it made absolutely no impact on Duryodhana or on Dhritarashtra for that matter. So that form where the Lord went as Pandavaduta, that huge form that he assumed, where he showed the Vishwarupa to everybody present there, that is the form which is worshipped in this Divyadesham as Pandavaduta Perumal. So that is something extra which is I thought I could share with you because it's relevant to this topic that we were talking about today. The Acharyas always talk about this episode of Pandavaduta as the Lord going there. And they say, how great is the compassion of the Lord, how much affection he had for these Pandavas. In any of the positions which are there associated with the Kshatriyas, right? This thing of going as a Duta is the most inferior level of work. It is generally said that somebody who does not have the ability to fight or to rule or to do anything else in an effective way is sent as a Duta because he only has to take the message and convey it there. So it's considered a very inferior job. And that yet Krishna, who is, what do you say, Akhilanda Kroti, Brahmanda Nayaka, or whichever word you use to describe him, he is the ruler of the entire universe. For the love of these Pandavas, he was ready to stoop down from that high position to this extremely low position and go as a Duta for the Pandavas. How much is the affection of the Lord? So we must also try to get a similar affection from the Lord. In fact, another thing that the Acharyas tell, just for the sake of enjoying that rasa, is that they say that in the previous avatara, What was the previous avatara before Krishna? Rama. So in the Rama avatara, Rama saw that he sent Hanuman as his Duta, and he saw all the glory that came to Hanuman because of that, isn't it? So he was so happy with that he said, okay, next time I must myself take on this role of a Duta. And because of that, he went as Pandava Duta. That's what the Acharyas say sometimes. But whatever it is, we need to understand that this whole thing tells us that how much affection Krishna is having. He is ready to do anything for the sake of the Pandavas. He took another lowly job in the Yuddha. He became the Sarathi. He was Partha Sarathi. He was the charioteer of Arjuna. So, like this, the Lord is ready to do anything and everything when he has love and affection for a devotee. Now, here, what he is doing, he is spending so much time and energy in explaining to Arjuna all these great truths. And thanks to Arjuna, because Arjuna was there, because he had the affection of the Lord, we are all benefiting by listening to these truths which the Lord has told in the Gita. So let us pray that Lord will only bless us and he will guide us to be able to do our sadhana in such a way that we also get the affection of the Lord. With that, we will come to the end of the satsang for today. Let us feel grateful. We are part also of a Guru Parampara. We also have the good fortune. We have done some punyas in some past birth. We have done sadhana in some past births. And because of that, today we are at this position where we have access to some sources to learn all this knowledge, to be able to adopt in our lives also. Right? So let us feel grateful to the Lord and let us pray more and more, not for things in this material world, but for more opportunities to understand, to receive such knowledge, to understand this knowledge, and to be able to adopt it in our own sadhana. So we will stop here for today. And in the next satsang, we will continue from the 4th shloka of the Bhagavad Gita onwards. So let us end with Kritagnyata. Let us offer gratitude at the lotus feet of Sri Krishna and Guru for inspiring us to start and join this satsang. And let us pray for their blessings and grace to always be on us. Thank you everybody for attending, and we will meet again next Thursday as usual. Namaskar.